This week's episode of Real Housewives of Miami, we heard Alexia mention that in the 80s, she dated a white powder cowboy. If you're new to the franchise or you're like unfamiliar with Alexia's lore, let me tell you the story of her first marriage. It's 1987, Alexia and her father are out to lunch, and into the restaurant walk Peggy Rosello, the man who would eventually become her husband, and one of his friends, one of his associates, another cowboy. They're kind of like looking at her through the cafeteria, and the friend is kind of like, stop looking at this woman who's here with her husband. So nothing happens, but later that week on that Friday night, they are both at the same nightclub, and the friend who was with Peggy at this cafeteria and saw Alexia saw her at the nightclub and was like, hey, that's the girl from lunch. Alexia gets invited into their VIP section, like she and Peggy start chatting. They see each other the following day, they go to the beach, and Alexia sleeps over at Peggy's apartment. And some tangential adjacent lore, it's rumored that this apartment that Alexia went back to where Peggy Rosello was living is the apartment building that collapsed in Surfside in 2021. I don't know how we would like confirm or deny this. I guess Alexia herself could tell us, but again, that's the rumor. Anyway, so she's sleeping there. Around 1 a.m., Peggy Rosello wakes up and he's like, I've got to go take care of something. She's thinking to herself, like, this man has a girlfriend, this man has a wife, but in actuality, he was receiving a shipment. In these early stages of their relationship, Alexia says that he just described his job as working for the family business. Peggy at that point was taking on a larger role in the organization, and he says because of that, it took about a year and a half for him to start really seriously dating Alexia. So in my head, it's probably like 1989, 1990 perhaps. They move in together in Coconut Grove. They say at this point they still have not explicitly discussed what Peggy does for work, but Alexia at this point is a little suspicious. There's like a lot of cash going on. He's always driving different cars. So high level, quickly what happens, they're living together in Coconut Grove. Peggy Rosello leaves after breakfast one morning with Alexia, and he gets tipped off by one of the neighbors that there are some cops there. He needs to sneak away, and then he doesn't explicitly tell Alexia again what they're there for, but he just tells her, you need to get rid of all the evidence. Alexia says in this moment, she like springs into action. She is lighting matches. She's burning all these photos of like cars and speedboats. She's finally like kind of being questioned by the cops. They show up at the door. They're like, who is it that lives here? I don't know, my boyfriend. What do you call him? She says, oh, I just call him babe. Like she's like not giving anything. One thing about Alexia, you have to say like she's always been loyal. So ultimately like Peggy Rosello gets out of this. They get engaged. Alexia says that he pays $42,000 in cash for her engagement ring. They're getting married at the Intercontinental in downtown. Willie Chirino is set to perform. I mean, seriously, like an insane wedding gets set up, and then they get tipped off that the cops are aware of the wedding and they are waiting for Peggy. So ultimately they do not have that wedding ceremony. On this time is when Alexia says her family was kind of pressuring her to get out of this relationship with Peggy, and she's like maintaining, no, like I've got to stand by my man. And still the Alexia we know today. In September of 1991, Peggy Rosello is arrested, and while he is out on bail in 1992, they get married and have their son, Peter. There's another adjacent story here of Peggy Rosello avoiding cops while Alexia is giving birth to Peter in South Miami Hospital, where I too was born. Peggy Rosello learns that there are cops waiting for him in the parking garage. Peggy turns himself in, he starts his 5-year prison sentence, and he's released a year early, and in 1996, Frankie is born. And also in 1996, Alexia and Peggy get divorced. Both Alexia and Peggy speak on the docuseries on Netflix about the Cowboys. If you haven't watched it, it is so well done. I've said before we learned how Alexia was cast and like how Real Housewives of Miami and